Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Rappler Newsroom. Today, the Court of Appeals has voided the 2018 shutdown order of the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's after 8 years of long battle of Rappler and its legal counsels. Today, we have our CEO and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa and our lead counsel, Attorney Francis Lim. So before we entertain questions from our friends in the media, Maria and Attorney Lim will give their statements first. Maria, go ahead.
Sure. So first of all, welcome, thank you. Ay, ito pala. Sorry. Thank you for coming here, and to the guys in the Zoom. Here's our statement, and this speaks for all of Rappler. Rappler welcomes the Court of Appeals ruling that eliminates a long-standing threat to its corporate existence on account of a flawed ruling by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, led then by Teresita Arbosa. When the rule of law prevails, justice is served. It's a vindication after a torturous 8 years of harassment. 8 years. The CA was unequivocal in its rejection of the SEC's 2018 shutdown order, declaring it illegal, that's its quote, and a grave abuse of discretion. We have always asserted that the SEC and bank violated the law and its own procedures when it handed down this harsh verdict against Rappler. That was on January 11th, 2018. That followed a short probe into allegations that the Philippine depository receipts that Rappler issued to Amidyar violated the constitutional ban on foreign control of a media company. We are a Filipino company. We are independent. And it brings us relief and joy that the CA is standing with us and with journalism. This inspires us to do more, to do better. It's a fact that the Duterte government used the SEC order to unleash its power to further harass us, our employees, our stakeholders, and our communities. Banks here in the Philippines refused to do business with us. Clients shied away from advertising with us. Government officials and agencies shut their doors on us. We were forced to close our Jakarta bureau, stop our expansion plans. Rappler couldn't even open a bank account outside the Philippines. Imagine. So it was like running the race with like one leg. We look forward to the speedy dismissal of our remaining 2 cases, the cyber libel case at the Supreme Court and the anti-dummy case at a Pasig court. Without the support of freedom-loving Filipinos and people from all over the world, we wouldn't have survived. Without the support of lawyers who stood up for us, right? We are so grateful for you. That is the biggest lesson we learned during these last 8 years. This court decision, the latest in a string of court victories for Rappler, is a much-needed reminder that the mission of journalism can thrive, even in the line of fire, to speak truth to power, to hold the line, to build a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Attorney Francis.
I had been looking at things very objectively from day one. And I was telling Maria, Glenda, and the rest of the team, I had no doubt that one day, this day will come. And it has come today. Okay, we want to thank the Court of Appeals for a well-reasoned decision, very objective, and a decision that has tremendous impact on the ability of our corporates to raise capital and to stay in business, but more importantly, on the impact of the decision on press freedom and our democracy in general. So that's my opening statement.
Thank you, Attorney Francis. Thank you, Maria. Now we're opening the floor for questions from our friends in the media. Who wants to go first?
I'm Barnaby from Al Jazeera. So, of course, you both have spoken about how this is important for press freedom in the Philippines. But in the decision itself, the Court of Appeals also underscores the importance of press freedom and how even if I understood it right, even if Rappler had violated foreign ownership rules, the punishment should not have been tantamount to the dissolution of RAP, if I understood the decision right. How do you feel about that? That in the decision that's there.
I read the decision, and the Court of Appeal said that there was no violation at all by Rappler by issuing the PDRs, or the Philippine Depository Receipts. In fact, the Court of Appeals made a distinction between shares, which grants ownership on the shareholder, and the PDR, which is a derivative of a share of stock. So that's my reading as a lawyer. In fact, the Court of Appeals has cited the earlier Court of Tax Appeals decision distinguishing between a share of stock, which is the evidence of ownership, between a depository receipt, which is just a derivative of a share of stock. In the Court of Appeals decision, the Court of Appeals said that PDR does not grant ownership over the company, in this particular case, Rappler. So, and because the attributes of ownership lies in the share of stock, not in the PDR that was issued by Rappler Holdings.
The mere mention of press freedom in the decision.
I actually think what was interesting, if you read the whole case, right, the whole decision, is it's overwhelming. It is an overwhelming decision, essentially saying that the SEC en banc, that those decisions were not just unconstitutional, but tried to overturn the CA's own decision. And I love this one. I'll read this to you, because when we were reading it, I was like, oh my God. It's also really well written. You might wanna go through it. I love this one. Like a bull seeing red, the SEC en banc plowed through law and jurisprudence to reach its mark, the death of Rappler. The SEC en banc violated the hierarchy of courts and ignored procedure. These actions have no place in a democratic state. Rule of law, right? It returns. These were all the things that we had said in 2017 and 2018. Francis always, Siyempre, I was much more like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, right? But it also was, if you look through the way Francis had pointed this out, that this decision also references the Court of Tax Appeals, the 4 tax evasion charges that are there, and uses the definition of PDR. So if you look at it now, right, we had 5 tax evasion charges, all dismissed. We had this that shut us down, that prevented us from effectively working. Isn't that forum shopping? I still ask for this. I still ask this now. But I think the best part right now is that I try to get rid of anger and the 8 years of harassment and say, yay, we move forward.
Hold the line, so to speak.
Hold the line.
Hold the line, so to speak.
Hi, Attorney Francis. Mikael of Reuters. So in terms of ways forward, what are the remedies that's still available for SEC, and how are you going to take on,
Well,
in
I
case
won't
they
be
file
surprised
them?
if the SEC will take this all the way to the Supreme Court, which is the final arbiter of our cases. But I don't want to preempt the Supreme Court, but as a lawyer, again, looking at it objectively, I don't see any reason why the Supreme Court will reverse it. I'm just talking as a lawyer, very objective, for that matter. So there's a remedy available to the SEC and the Solicitor General Office if they want to exercise that prerogative. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that things would stop here.
8 years.
Maria, what's your outlook on the remaining cases, especially the one in the Supreme Court, because it has a prison term that's part of the case?
Yeah. No, thank you for asking. There are 2 left. One is the anti-discrimination, the anti-dummy law, a violation of the anti-dummy law. That is against the board of directors of Rappler, right? So imagine we had the former president of IBM. We have a woman who created the Chinese International School. We had our board was actually the best of the entrepreneurs that we could find. Now they face those charges, and like me, every time they have to leave the country, they have to ask for approval from the courts. That's one. The second one, so the anti-dummy law is connected to these cases, right? The violation of the anti-dummy law. If there is no foreign ownership and no foreign control, so hopefully we see a speedy resolution. The second one, which is the one that's worse, because if we lose this case, I could go directly to jail. That is the Supreme Court en banc. We have the cyber libel case. That cyber libel case, you guys are familiar with this. It is, I will say the same thing. We see, I hope the world turns right side up. Let me give the courts the respect we have given them through the last 8 years, the faith we have had, and continue, right? Because I think what was clear through all of this is that there are good people in our judiciary. There are good people in government, and we have banked on that. Like literally, we had to have faith. And slowly, it's coming through. I was talking, I'm not emotional. So last night I was with one of our shareholders, one of our directors who also faced the case, and we were talking to people, and I was saying that the lesson that this taught me is that it's the people who, even though they're afraid, stand up and do things that could get them in trouble. And I talked about this woman who, in one of the, at one point I had 11 criminal charges. And there was I had to go file bail. If I didn't post bail that day, someone tipped me, said if I didn't post bail, there was a 4-day holiday after that. And by the time I got down to the basement to try to post bail, it was after courts had closed. It was after 5. And at that point, I couldn't go to any friend. I can't stay at a friend's house. I can't stay at my house. It was during COVID. And I talked to the woman there and asked her, please allow me to file bail. She went to get her boss, and she looked at me and said, I know who you are. And I just thought that I would have to figure out where to stay. And she opened the cash register and allowed me to post bail. Super simple, super simple. But those are the things that kept us going.
Yeah, lastly, on my end, Maria, are there lessons learned, if any, about having airtight processes and making sure that everything is in order, particularly on small legal clauses that could be weaponized against you by a vindictive government?
Well, I've told Maria that just continue doing your job as a journalist. Leave everything else to us. And that's what happened. Okay? For as long as you do your CWA, complete staff work, tell the truth, get the truth as much as possible, and just do your job. And at the end of the day, we will prevail. And this is the day.
The lesson I learned is it doesn't matter if you follow the law, if the people who implement the law decide to weaponize it. It doesn't matter if you follow every single clause if rule of law does not exist. Right? So the crazy thing is, I've said this often, the Philippines was in hell. Now we're in purgatory. Our cases are going away. We have civil society gaining more. There are no more new cases. But it looks like the rest of the world is now going to hell, right? You have the rise of the far right. You have many of the same things that we've had to grapple with in the Philippines, the weaponization of social media. How does this all connect? Let me bring you to a country like Georgia, right? Georgia, which is in 16 weeks, they passed Russian-style foreign agents law, very similar to what this case is, right? And what they did is 10% of the people protested against it. The president vetoed it, and yet it passed. So it will come into law September 3rd, and they have parliamentary elections October 26th. Why do I bring Filipinos to Georgia? Because we live in one world. And the fall of democracy is very simple. If you are silent when rule of law is being bent, you consent to the loss of your rights. Don't be silent, right? It was a tough time for us during the time period, but to your question, could we have done anything better? We could have changed 10 million different things, but there would have still been another reason to file something against us. 11 criminal charges is no, I'd still have to ask for permission to travel. You can lose your rights like this, and I hope that what we've learned out of it is Rappler has learned we hold the line. You have held the line with us. The Filipinos have stood up. And I hope that what we've learned is how precious and how fragile democracy is.
Thank you, Mikael. Next, we have more questions from Victoria Tulad of ABS-CBN.
Good afternoon po. Congratulations. Now that the threat to your corporate existence has been eliminated, what are Rappler's plans po? You mentioned there was supposed to be an expansion before, but it was cut short. So what are your plans?
We had a Jakarta bureau that we closed down soon after because you know what happened when the SEC, some of you were here during that time period in January 2018. Right after the SEC revoked our license to operate, within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue. We shouldn't have survived 2018. But this is where you have to look at crisis as opportunity. We were able to pivot and create a separate sustainable business model. Our plans today, oh my gosh. So, many things. The first is a realization that big tech has weaponized, has corrupted the public information ecosystem. You have heard me say this over and over. I'm tired of myself saying it, but please be aware that you're being manipulated, that there is insidious manipulation, that by design, social media spreads lies faster than facts. That's a 2018 MIT study. And that what we saw in 2017 in the data in the Philippines, if you lace it with fear, anger, hate, it goes viral even faster. Women in the Philippines in 2010 and 2017 were attacked at least 10 times more than men, right? So what we have done to deal with this after, it is now 2024, 2 years ago we began to build deliberative technology. So it is a matrix protocol chat app. We invite Filipino news organizations to join us in this to avoid the insidious manipulation of social media. That's on the tech end. And on the other end is, I appeal to journalists to realize that we are all, regardless of our, whether you're from AP or Reuters or ABS or GMA or Rappler, we're on the same side in the battle the world is in. It is a battle for facts, a shared reality. And I hope that we begin to collaborate more closely together.
Final po from me. Do you think you would have won the case if we are still under the Duterte administration? Did it help you that the government or the administration has changed? Thank you.
Well, whether it was under the Duterte administration or under this administration, my own perspective is that as long as you're on the side of the rule of law, you will always prevail. Okay? And I believe in the independence of the judiciary, and this is one concrete example. No? Even the earlier Court of Appeals decision did not uphold the SEC in revoking its license. No? So that was done under the Duterte administration. Okay? So to your question, as a lawyer, I always believe in the rule of law. For as long as you're in the right, think you will prevail at the end of the day.
I didn't think this quote would apply to us. You know Martin Luther King's quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." We followed the rule of law, and we had faith that, fear does a lot of things, and we understood that it's part of the reason. I think I said this in a commencement speech at Benilde, right? I can't get mad at our other Filipinos who may have been afraid. We understood the fear, but at the same time, we were always surprised by the Filipinos who did stand up against us. I mean, look, who really sacrificed the most in all of this, right? Laila de Lima spent almost 7 years in jail. It also taught us this other thing of you have to hold the line. We didn't step back from it. We were pummeled for not stepping back, but now it's right side up again. So it shouldn't be political. Law should not be political, and it shouldn't matter who is in power. That, I hope, is the maturity our country gains.
Thank you, Victoria. Now we have a question from Sui Liwi of the New York Times from Zoom.
Hi, Maria. Thank you for this. Hi. So my question is related to the earlier question, but I was also wondering whether you could address the future of press freedom in the Philippines. It feels like the pressure on you and Rappler have eased somewhat, but at the same time, journalists continue to be killed in the Philippines. Was wondering whether you could talk a bit about that. Thanks.
Yeah, so I've said this over and over. It's like we were in hell, now we're in purgatory. It is far from perfect. What's press freedom? It's actually up to us, the journalists who are here, the civil society who demand better information. But I think what's become harder for journalism, not just in the Philippines, but all around the world, is that the distribution of news is corrupted. I'm sorry I keep bringing it back to big tech, because the reason why you are seeing so many news organizations, except the New York Times, the reason you're seeing so many news organizations laying off people, so many news organizations shutting down, Vice, BuzzFeed News, right, in the United States. Same in the Philippines, CNN Philippines, 300 people lost their jobs, is because big tech, which has decided to prioritize spreading lies, where journalists have no control over this, big tech has corrupted the information ecosystem. That is by design. But let me answer just press freedom. The case is going away. Rule of law going right side up is a sign, a step in the right direction. We thank the courts, especially the Special 7th Division of the Court of Appeals for this you got to read it. The decision is really fantastic to read. Savored every bit of it. And, my team will laugh, because in the back while I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, press freedom is up to us. We have to continue reclaiming our rights, and there are costs and consequences, and you've seen this globally. In the last 17 years, democracy has been rolled back. That is both Freedom House and VDEM. And the journalists in those countries where democracy has rolled back are the ones who pay the price. The attacks on journalists, the imprisonment of journalists, the killings of journalists in Gaza. We just had 2 journalists from Al Jazeera English die, right? So the journalists are paying the price, but I think despite all of that, we must continue doing our jobs.
Thank you, Sui. I think we have another question from Barnaby Lo. Let's go first with Cecil Morella. Sir?
I'd like to rephrase the question about to what extent is the president being Marcos instead of a Duterte help in maybe influencing or giving a signal perhaps to the courts that they can give a favorable decision to your side?
I have not seen anything or felt anything where President Marcos is trying to influence the court one way or the other, to be fair to him.
And that's a good thing.
And that's a good...
Can you say that again? Oh.
I have not seen or felt anything that President Marcos is trying to influence the court one way or the other.
I think you're not on.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's fine. One more time. Sorry. Sorry, guys.
The mic just has to be close.
I have not seen nor felt anything where President Marcos has tried to influence our courts of law. No? Especially in this case, I think he took a hands-off policy, no, on matters like this, especially affecting the freedom of the press, so, in fairness to our incumbent president. As to the former president, I don't want to comment, to say the least.
So, do you agree with Ms. Ressa that it's purgatory now instead of hell?
Well, there is always a cleansing process, no? But we're getting there. Okay, it may not be a perfect world, but I think we're getting there, and I hope it stays that way, and hope we improve. No.
May I have a last question, Maria?
No, I wanted to pick on Maria's point on what do you call this? The influence of on mass media on this day of information. No? And I want to quote something, no, from the decision itself. No, it said the framers of the Constitution sought to enable a multitude of mass media entities to function, owned by a variety of persons and corporations. This was to ensure the birth of a marketplace of ideas, which was not existent in the darker days. I love that phrase.
May I have a last question? Maria, do you still have a need for a go bag? I remember you saying you kept a go bag with cash to post in case you needed to post bail.
I haven't had to post bail again since 2020, so far, but it's still there because I guess that's that's what we've learned, right? We live in a time of crisis, unfortunately, regardless of which government is in place. Look, even America has to deal with this. Every country, there's so much change. Everything is changing so fast. So it's the mindset that we had to survive this time period is to turn crisis into opportunity. So take it going forward. I think the one thing we didn't mention, aside from the court decision and then the information ecosystem, is governance and corruption. So you asked about I think the Philippines, and let's pull it all the way back, right? We have always had, for a very long time, endemic corruption, weak law enforcement, and weak institutions. What we want to see, and there were periods of time when things have gotten better, we would love to see all of those weak, especially institutions, get significantly better, and that isn't going to happen without journalists who hold power to account and citizens, a civil society that demands better.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind. The first one, I'm gonna rephrase his first question, which is actually a rephrase of her question.
Ano gusto niyong sabihin namin?
Because Maria, because you said that it should not be political.
Yeah.
But is it not political when we saw you winning cases right after former President Duterte stepped down, and then we saw former Senator Laila de Lima win her cases after former President Duterte stepped down?
I love that by pointing that out. I think, Barnaby, that's in the analysis you write, right? I mean, in terms of us, right? I hate being a newsmaker. I would much prefer to be writing about it. I think that we can point out a lot of these things. But again, for me, we have continued fighting the battle. Our legal cases, the appeals have continued, even though we've won the 5 tax evasion charges. They've again filed it. They've appealed it. Your question about can they appeal it? I appealed to I think in that case, the Solicitor General, right? Or the BIR. Please stop appealing. We've had 8 years of harassment. Politics, let me give you this, because I know what you want. Everything is political, right? Your identity, your task, and it is tougher for journalists to do our jobs everywhere around the world because everything is political. In terms of the Philippines, what's clear, and Francis has said this, is that there is no pressure from the most powerful person in the government hierarchy Is that fair to say?
Yes.
There's no pressure. And for the judges and the justices who have this, now all it requires is courage to do the right thing.
Right. Okay, second question. You've already partly answered this question, but just very simply, how would you describe the state of press freedom in the Philippines right now? Because as mentioned by our New York Times colleague, some journalists are still getting killed. There are still journalists who are in jail.
Frenchie May Cumpio is still
And-
in jail, right?
Right? Libel is still punishable by jail time. So, right. So how would you describe it? I guess what's your message as well to your fellow journalists, especially those who feel that they're being persecuted, like you?
I don't like giving the power away. It isn't up to the government. It is up to us to keep doing the hard-hitting investigative journalism regardless of which administration is in power. And every country around the world now, journalists have come under attack in some way. And I think what we need to try to do is to collaborate more closely together, because the fragmented environment that social media has created, when was the time when we built on each other's investigative stories, right? There was a time when that was the case. We don't do that often enough now. Our distribution system degrades and commodifies journalism. Social media rewards the worst of journalism. We need to maintain our quality. So I will throw that question back to us. I think it's what we tried to do in Rappler. We tried to stay true to who we are, to continue doing the job regardless of who is in power.
One last question. How significant, because you've had one court victory after another these past couple, or maybe just this past year actually. Yeah. How significant is this particular court victory today, especially in relation to the other cases that are still pending?
Well, for me, in relation to other cases, this is the worst case because it spelled the death. It would have spelled the death of Rappler as a corporate entity. I think that that was recognized by this court. No?
This is the worst case. Imagine not being able to open a bank account. That's how simple it was, right? Imagine having to look. There was a period of time when we had lawyers here because we weren't sure we were going to get shut down. Imagine living under that uncertainty of having a sword hanging over your head. Every Rappler had to deal with that. Imagine if you guys remember Pia and the president singling her out, right? Duterte singling her out. Also, you went through the same thing. So for us, in this one, there's no strike orders. SEC, we want to see your website. Show that already. And this allows us to continue to build our business at a time when the business of journalism is also under attack.
Worse than going to jail.
Oh my gosh, let me go to the next one. Well, obviously, I don't want to go to jail, right? The cyber libel case, again, an appeal to the Supreme Court. It is now at the Supreme Court en banc. The case is very clear as this. And this case, it is in the court of last appeal. Ray and I could go to jail for up to 7 years. So, yeah, it's there, it's hanging, but I'm not going to let it stop me from doing my job. I think that's the critical part, right? Fear only works if you let it work.
Okay, thank you, Barnaby. Once again, Michael Flores from Reuters.
Maria, you mentioned that press freedom is in a state of purgatory at the moment. What kind of improvements would you want to see, particularly on the level of access to information that we are able to get from government side that would allow us to pursue more independent and more in-depth journalism, particularly on sensitive topics that would require access to documents from government?
Ends. Right? Like, I guess part of it is I hope that we see the robustness, the access to information that we've just seen today in this decision, that the entire world of the Philippines turns right side up again. But there were many degrading actions taken in the prior administration. SAL ends. Do we have access to SAL ends, right? FO, the Freedom of Information Act, those are there. But having said that, on our end, how's corruption, right? Corruption through the agencies, corruption through media. How do we handle this ourselves? No one is above the blame. We create this. So again, I go back. What are we going to do? How do we move it forward? We have an opening in Rappler. We're certainly going to run forward.
Attorney Francis, you mentioned that had Rappler lost the case, it would have spelled its death, no, as a corporate entity. Just to sum up, no, because if you read through the decision, it's a lot of, to an extent, legal gobbledygook, no. So if you like simplify and summarize the significance and importance of what the decision does to Rappler and it as a corporate, entity.
Leave the media as the Constitution envision it to operate, because media has an essential part in the market of ideas. No? I think there's something here in the Supreme Court which says, no, mass media's role in informing Filipinos of the truth is even more vital in an age of misinformation, social media, and fake news. Even then, the framers of the Constitution foresaw that lies would be peddled to Filipinos and recognized mass media's privilege and responsibility to stand as bastions of truth and sentinels of neutrality in an ever increasingly dichotomized society. It is for this reason that the framers sought to prevent foreign influence to allow Filipinos to tread their own path and shape their own values. This is a very telling portion of the decision.
Attorney Francis, just a quick follow-up, no? Because the order effectively voids the 2018 order, the 2020 compliance, and the 2022 order of the SEC. So, tama ba yung conclusion that the decision effectively allows Rappler to exist as a corporate entity?
Yes. In fact, there's a specific directive of the Court of Appeals to the SEC, no, to reinstate, no, Rappler in the corporate register.
You asked me, what would I like to see? So I had to stop and think about it for a little bit, but here are my wish list for the Marcos administration. And for any leader in power today, I think the first is, just like our questions aren't filtered here, don't filter the questions. Answer the questions. You're an expert. You're a leader, right? Lead. The world needs leaders. I think the second one is give us greater access to information. Journalists are not the enemy. As this very idealistic document points out, we have a role in society. We are your allies. Give us the information, and we will, I hope, do the right thing with all of this. The last one, decriminalization of libel, because this is one of the few countries in the world where libel is a criminal act, where journalists can go to jail. I find it, well, I won't talk about my case again. I will give the courts the respect they deserve on this. But thank you again for this. Oh, sabi niya, you have to read it. Thank you. Thank you for this decision. It is the ideal of the Constitution. It brings the world right side up, and it gives journalists, it gives Rapplers a chance to do our jobs. Thank you.
Okay, I think that ends and before we end, let's have Attorney Francis again.
Let's continue to have faith in the independence of the judiciary. No? I think things are shaping up. No, the Chief Justice, the incumbent Chief Justice, is doing everything in the court's power, no, to make the judiciary as independent as possible. Let's keep the faith. No, let's believe. Thank you.
The biggest question globally is whether the international rules-based standard still exists, right? And I think in the Philippines, what we are starting to show is the rule of law is strong. Again, we appeal to the justices. On your question, the climate of fear has eased. There are still places in the Philippines where the fear is palpable and real. That's normally now connected with corruption also, right? So the old problems are still there. But I think for us, it's a day of celebration. It's a day of hope and perseverance. That we keep doing the right thing, that doing the right thing is the right thing.
Thank you so much for joining us in our today's press conference. Once again, Maria Ressa and Attorney Francis Lim. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Anong gusto mong sabihin namin? Come here, Barnaby.